a modest green of about 1/3%, 0.4 now. Not looking all that modest, it's getting better.
Markets have come off from the day's high. In fact, just on the verge of breaking into the red for the Nifty and the Sensex.
The market has come off its highs, but we're still, just about 70 points away from that 14,000 mark on the Nifty. Banking stocks lead the uptrend in Indian equities and midcaps underperform. By the end, the Nifty and the Sensex go home with gains of around 0.5%.
Nifty and Sensex post a record close for the 14th time this month. They gain 0.5%. Midcaps underperform.
Financials lead the markets higher. HDFC Twins, ICICI Bank and IndusInd Bank gain the most. Nifty Bank rallies 1.5% on hopes of continued recovery. State Bank of India expects 8 to 10% credit growth and recoveries from stressed assets to pick up.
Auto stocks fall after government proposes to make dual front airbags mandatory in new models of cars from the 1st of April. Consumer durables do well after Havells and Dixon Technologies tell us that consumption is doing well.
Select mid-cap stocks stand out. Sterlite soars after China plans to double its 5G base station capacity. Pesalo rallies another 20% after SBI Life buys stake. Puravankara continues to gain on investment from IFC Emerging Fund Asia.
And finally, to wrap the year, 2020 turns out to be the biggest year for IPOs. 16 companies raise over 31,000 crore rupees through primary market issuances. They see an overwhelming demand of 10 lakh crore rupees. They gain an average of 40% post-listing. Well, those are the top 5 headlines from Dalal Street on a day when the markets went on to notch fresh gains. Nifty closing in on 14,000 and Sensex, hold your breath, closing in on 50,000. Well, not that close, but pretty close. Welcome to Markets Today, the show where we will tell you all that happened in those 6 exciting hours of trading in 5 headlines. I'm Lata Venkatesh, with me my colleague Mangalamman. Hi, Mangala.
Hi Lata, what a day it was indeed. 14 out of 20 sessions in December, the Nifty hitting a record high. Well, any day is a Sunday, a bulls would say. But let's see what happens. And we have a show which is befitting the kind of moves that we had in the markets today. In Market Opinion, we have Mihir Vora, Director, CIO of Max Life Insurance. In Corporate Voices, we have some big ones. Ashwini Bhatia, MD of SBI, Rajiv Bajaj of Bajaj Auto. And from the consumer durable space, we have Anil Rai Gupta of Havells India as well. That's not all. We also have some opinion coming in from Atul Lal of Dixon Technologies. But before all of that, important voices and the way the markets went, the way they're likely to go, let's recap how trade was today. Lata, what did you make of today?
Well, a bit of modesty is in order because we were not the only ones rallying. Right. We were once again part of a global rally, and we were not even the ones that rose the most. You could say we've already risen, but so have others. So all equity markets, you saw Nikkei rising over 2.5%. That was the biggest. FTSE, of course, for independent reasons, the European markets, especially the UK market, is up in a way. But even markets that rose less were about 0.5% higher. So let's be very clear. We were part of a global high tide, and that lifted our boat as well. There are plenty of reasons. The US has finally signed the stimulus into law, so it's a done deal. More vaccine candidates, more vaccination deadlines are drawing near, both in India and abroad. So all that, there's enough reason to buy. But obviously, stocks have already shown in that have already discounted a lot of the gains. And therefore, in India, the bulls sought out that area which still offers a bit of value. Financials. So banks, both private and public, were the ones that were leading the rally. And of course, it was low valuations, but perhaps part of it is also because the economy is healing with so much of liquidity being poured and the global markets looking a better place. So that means always better for banks because their loans will be returned.
Absolutely. Fair point, Lata, as far as the banking moves are concerned. But as far as individual stocks that move and individual indices that moved, I'll draw a parallel from what you said about the global markets. Yesterday, the Nasdaq did rather well. The Dow Jones did well. S&P 500 did well. What did not do too well was the Russell Index. Take a look at the indices that did well today. The Nifty did well. The Sensex did well. The Nifty Bank did well. What did not do too well? the mid-cap index. So the market breadth was, split right down the middle, one stock declining for one gaining. And that at the time when we started with nearly 8 stocks in the green for one in the red. So there was some profit taking, understandable profit taking. But banks, Axis Bank, IndusInd Bank, HDFC Bank and ICICI Bank accounted for nearly entire 400 plus gain that we saw on the Nifty bank itself. The biggest gainers, of course, were HDFC Bank, biggest contributors rather were HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank and Axis Bank itself. Top losers were a few of them from the commodities arena. We had, Coal India down almost 2% was a big gainer yesterday. Steel, Hindalco, all these companies, they were surging earlier. So maybe some bit of profit taking coming in out there. The mid-cap gainers again were banks and a couple of these PSUs. So we had Union Bank, which was higher. Apart from that, we had IGL, MGL, both the gas companies higher by almost 3 and 4% PTC as well as Escorts ended higher as well. Mid-cap losers again from the commodities arena. We had JSPL lower, we had Vedanta lower, we had something like NMDC also slipping in trade today. But then the biggest gains actually came in the sub-mid-cap space, the cash stocks. Matrimony, for instance, up 14%. Snowman Logistics, huge volumes, nearly 4.8 crore shares traded, and we had 13% gains out there. You spoke about Purvankara already, as far as the real estate business is concerned. Fact, another company, up almost 18%. So there were some big movers in the cash stocks.
And difficult to find a reason for everything, because there was an assortment of small stocks that have done very well and, big double-digit gains. So we'll explain some of them as we go along, but first let us get to expert opinion. Mihir Vora of Max Life Insurance says that the biggest unlock will be seen in financials. So he's not chasing after the hotels and the exhibition stocks. He says all of that will be reflected in financials. Listen in.
The biggest unlock will be the financials, frankly, and that's where we were underweight, but we have been reducing our underweight positions quite significantly over the last couple of months, because ultimately they will reflect everything that is right or wrong with the economy. Autos, essentially, the recovery play will be the commercial vehicles, and the core strength is in rural. So the commercial vehicle segment and the tractor segment is something that we continue to be positive on. We are not that gung-ho on two-wheelers because, I think it's a saturated segment, and we did see some incremental demand because of the, the lockdown and the need for more personal transportation, but that may peter out.
Okay, you will hear more from Mihir Vora. First, let me start with the sentence he spoke about financials and take you to the second headline. Financials led the market higher. HDFC Twins, ICICI Bank, IndusInd Bank, all of them were the ones that gained the most. The Nifty Bank gained 1.5%. But it was not as if the private banks were the only ones which gained. The bigger share or slightly bigger share of the recovery were the public sector banks. So let's hear it from Ashwini Bhatia, the Managing Director of State Bank of India. He explains what's going right for the bank.
October, November, December were good months. Credit growth did pick up, and more so on the retail side. As we had said after our results, that we would think that over the next, in the second half especially, the growth on the credit side will be there. And we think that our growth should be between 8 to 10%. For the banking system, we know that the NPV of Bhushan, and this is something in the press already, that will give the banks about 33,000 crores. We'll get a larger portion because our exposure there was much bigger. Similarly, in the case of Bhushan also, we do expect that recovery will happen in the first half of 2021. So, that's a moving number, and there are plenty of ifs and buts. Depends a lot on the legal processes. I think both of the accounts are in their last leg, and we only hope that the bankers do recover a good amount of money.
Okay, well, let's stick with banks. HDFC Bank gained over 1%. It's one of those few years, maybe the only year, that HDFC Bank has lagged the Nifty and the Nifty Bank. But why was it in the news today, and why were investors cheering? CNBC TV 18 learns that the bank has picked the person for their top job, their chairperson's job, which is set to fall vacant very shortly. Ritu Singh, my colleague, broke the story, so let's hear it from her.
In what is a very keenly tracked transition in the Indian banking space, we are given to understand that former Economic Affairs Secretary Atanu Chakravarti is tipped to take over as the next chairman of HDFC Bank. Remember, this is especially important coming at a time when HDFC Bank has undergone a leadership transition, with its longtime CEO Aditya Puri retiring in April and being succeeded by Shashidhar Jagdishan. The top post of the chairman is set to fall vacant on the 1st of January 2021, which is when the current chairperson Shamala Gopinath is set to retire. Therefore, in a meeting held yesterday, the board of HDFC Bank approved Atanu Chakravarti's name as the part-time chairperson of the bank and has sent this to the Reserve Bank of India for its final approval. Now, RBI approval is going to be key for this appointment, but we're given to understand that the bank does not see any hurdle in this. In fact, it has been unofficially given the comfort that the name could likely be approved, which is why the name has been shortlisted and sent to the Reserve Bank of India for the final nod. Now, Atanu Chakravarti last served as the Economic Affairs Secretary up until April of this year, and therefore he may have a one-year cooling off period, after which he will be able to join the board of HDFC Bank. He's also served as the Secretary of Divestment and held various important positions in the Ministry of Finance. We reached out to him for a comment as well, but he declined to comment on this story.
Ritu, thanks a lot for that. Well, that is some new person at the helm of HDFC Bank. With that, we move on. The third headline for the day: auto stocks fell in trade after the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways shared a formal proposal for making dual front airbags mandatory for all cars. Government wants this to be implemented starting the 1st of April. Industry players say that they will be compelled to hike prices after the addition of this feature by almost 5,000 to 8,000 rupees per car. Parikshit Rutla is here with all the details. Parikshit.
Well, yes, this had been in consultation for some time, and the Ministry of Road Transport had been sending a message to the industry that this is something that will have to be done. They are of the view that many automobile companies are already offering dual front airbags in higher models, and therefore making it mandatory is not going to be a problem at all. So the timelines are like this: 1st April 2021 for new models and 1st June 2021 for existing models. Car makers are telling us that while it will not be difficult to do this technically, there will be a problem on the supply chains. Production plans will have to be realigned, and where will the additional requirement of airbags actually come from in this short period of 3 to 4 months? R.C. Bhargav of Maruti Suzuki said that there could be a pressure on supply chains and some impact on customers who are going in for lower cost models in the market right now. According to some estimates, there could be a price escalation in the range of 5,000 to 8,000 rupees. R.C. Bhargav also saying that if we are going in for compulsory front airbags, then we must also make sure that the rules regarding wearing of seatbelts must be strictly enforced, because if you're not wearing a seatbelt and you have an accident and there is an airbag in your car, you could suffer serious injuries. This is what Mr. Bhargav had to say. Back to you.
Okay. Well, we did speak to Mr. Bhargav, and we also spoke to Rajiv Bajaj. We spoke to him about the government's recent announcement of production-linked incentive schemes, or PLIs, for the auto sector as well. He welcomed the move, but he opposed any dilution of the eligibility criteria. Hear him out in his own words.
There must be a minimum threshold for the investment or the revenue or the exports. And I don't remember off the top of my head, but SIAM had been consulted on this, and we have put together our recommendations and forwarded that. And I think that is fair. The chorus for dilution from those numbers, so that more than, let's say, 14% of the suppliers who would apparently be eligible should be eligible. I want to say very clearly that I do not agree with this, because then it will, just become something that is aligned to being popular rather than furthering performance.
All right, whether auto demand is holding up or not, whether it will hold up or not, the big word is that consumption is holding up. And that's the word coming in from durables player, a big durables player, Havells. Anil Rai Gupta, the CMD, spoke to CNBC TV 18 today and said that he sees a positive demand trend in both B and C class towns. Meanwhile, Atul Lal, the MD of Dixon Technologies, another big mover this year, said that both demand as well as order book have been extremely healthy lately. Listen in.
demand holding up, especially from the B class, C class towns in the rural areas. It did show a little bit of a shift from the large towns to the smaller towns. The demand was shifting there. We also saw shifting from the unorganized sector to the organized sector initially because the disruption in supply chain for the unorganized sector. I think till that time it played well, the pent-up demand as well as the shift from unorganized to organized, from large town to small towns. It's holding up. The demand is still holding up as of now. We've seen some improvements in the residential sector, so the demand is holding up there. We've seen some sort of revival in the industrial portfolio, also industrial and infra portfolio. The PLI is yet to come, and so I hope that there will be a possibility of market share increases in the future. But the post-lockdown, we have definitely seen market share increases in most of our product.
When I talked to you last time, this particular agreement was in works. So we are fairly confident with the numbers that I had shared with you, and which are quite ambitious. We are in line with that. Demand and the order book has been extremely healthy, even for the domestic buyers, because in our case, more and more brands are looking at outsourcing as an opportunity.
Okay, so those were some very optimistic statements that we got both from Havells and Dixon. For the moment, it's a break, but do stay tuned. There are lots of many interesting stories, especially from the mid-cap space, that we have lined up for you on the other side of this break.
Welcome back. You're still with us on Markets Today. We've spoken to you about the auto sector, consumer sector, the markets, as well as the Nifty Bank. But let's get stock specific now. The fourth headline for the day, the Midcap Index, while it underperformed in today's trading session, a lot of stocks actually continued to outperform, and they're up for you on the screen. Pesalo, Sterlite Tech, as well as something like Puravankara rallied anywhere between 7 to 20%. Sonal Bhutra is here with the details of why these stocks were in focus and what kept them abuzz.
Thank you so much for that. Well, I have three stocks on my radar. Let me start with Sterlite Tech. The stock closed higher and was at a 52-week high level. That is because China has now unveiled their plans to double the 5G base station capacity in 2021. What that would mean is that the demand for optic fiber will go up, which will reduce the oversupply situation in China, and also the optic fiber prices will potentially increase, which will be positive for a company like Sterlite Tech. Pesalo Digital, the other stock I'm watching out for a second consecutive day, it was logged in upper circuit because yesterday SBI Life bought 38 lakh shares at 490 rupees per share, and that is basically a 9% stake for 186 crore rupees. Lastly, Puravankara, the stock was buzzing in trade today, has done very well this month itself because IFC and IFC Emerging Asia Fund will be investing $76 million alongside Puravankara Group for building affordable housing, and they will be constructing around 4,000 units over the next 5 to 7 years. So some momentum coming in Puravankara as well. Back to you.
Okay, that's a bunch of stocks that Sonal has explained as to why they were up and about. And now we are going to look back at 2020. That was one year which was a superb year for IPO. The IPO madness took over, as it were. 16 companies raised a total of 31,000 crore rupees. But for more interesting details, listen in to Rima Tendulkar.
It's been a blockbuster 2020 for IPOs, and we've collated some stats. 16 companies have raised a total of over 31,000 crore rupees via the IPO. But what was staggering is the kind of demand these IPOs saw. You remember the recent ones, right? Mrs. Bector's had 198 times in terms of subscription. Burger King was at 150 times, which means this 31,000 crore of IPOs on offer had a demand of 10 lakh crore rupees. You heard it right. 10 lakh crore rupees is the kind of subscription, is the kind of demand these IPOs had. So that's on the fundraise. And if you look at the the numbers, you would see the biggest demand actually came in for consumer names like Mrs. Bector's and Burger King, as well as all things digital like Root Mobile, Happiest Minds. These also saw some very strong subscriptions. So that's point number one in terms of the liquidity gush into the IPOs. Secondly, if you had invested in any of the IPOs, you got lucky, you would be making money as of today. In fact, in all the IPOs except UTI AMC, which is pretty flat compared to its issue price, you would have made double-digit gains had you got the IPOs issued to you. But the biggest gains were in 5 of them, where you would have made more than 100% if you had got those shares. So that's Root Mobile, Burger King, Rosari Bio, Happiest Mind, and Mrs. Bector. So again, it all boils down to consumer, digital, as well as a pharmaceutical name like Rosari Bio. What's also very interesting is the kind of listing day gains. On an average, 43% was the listing day gains that these IPOs saw, and in 6 of them, you've seen more than a 50% return on the listing day. Again, on your screen, you would see a Burger King, a Happiest Minds, Root Mobile. These are the ones which returned the maximum shareholders. Some of these issues also help the investors make quick money in the form of listing gains, anywhere between 14 to 131%. Chemcon Specialty is the one which tops the list, but apart from that, it's Happiest Minds and Root Mobile which have doubled on debuts. And some of the IPOs like a Root Mobile, Burger King, again, I think these names keep getting repeated. They're the ones which continued with their gains even after the listing pop, which means had you bought these shares after the opening, you would have still made close to about 50% on an average in some of them. And one of the names there also is Gland Pharmaceutical, which got listed at 710, but currently it's hovering around that 2400 mark. So you would have made money even if you had bought Gland Pharma after its opening levels. It's only 4 of the IPOs which are currently trading, which opened below their issue price. Where we had some negative returns on listing day. But some of the IPOs have not managed to hold on to their listing gains. We spoke about some of them where you would have made money. But in names like Chemcon Specialty, Mazgao Dock, Happiest Minds, they're all trading below their listing price. Back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Reema Tendulkar, for putting the year in perspective as far as new issues are concerned. And when that end of the day's play?
Absolutely, Lata. End of the day's play. The markets.
What a day it was.
What a day it was. 14th day, record high. Don't worry, we'll be tomorrow.
No, end of the day's play, India won.
Okay, India won. That's the one. India. That's all we'll do. Okay, stay tuned to CNBC TV 18. More markets as well as market updates and policy making decisions coming up right after this short break.